Awesome. Hey everyone, so welcome to the Rancher training. Today I will be doing a walkthrough of specifically Rancher 1.6.10. And my name is Amy. I'm a software engineer here at Rancher Labs. And I am joined by my coworker Bill, and he will be in the question and answering section. And he'll help me answer questions. And Bill, if you see any common questions that you feel like could be addressed verbally, please let me know as well. Okay, so today what we'll be doing is a technical introduction to Rancher. So we'll definitely make sure to focusing on doing a lot of demos, and we'll keep the slides to a minimum. So as always, questions are always welcome. So this demo is supposed to run for about an hour. However, we will make sure to stay as long as possible until all your questions are answered. So no worries, if you have more questions after the demo is over, we're happy to continue answering them. So some resources that you can check out outside of this demo are docs. Our docs are pretty thorough. So you can reach them at docs.rancher.com. If you're looking for a more interactive experience, or if you have more niche questions, you can go ahead and direct more questions at forums.rancher.com. So on that, we have both community members and our engineers and Rancher employees on hand to go ahead and answer all of your questions. Oftentimes, we also have great announcements on there as well. So definitely check that out. It's a great resource. And even further and more immediate is we have the Rancher Slack. So if you have any questions, please direct your questions there as well. It's super interactive. We have a lot of Rancher users there on hand to answer questions, as well as Rancher engineers. And there's a bunch of awesome channels and stuff where you can ask for more specific questions. So definitely go ahead and check that out as well. So today, what we will be talking about are a bunch of different things that I'll go through after this. So first, we'll set up Rancher. Once again, that is Rancher 1.6.10 that I'll be using today. And we'll be talking about access control. So this is so that the rest of the world can't access your Rancher instance. We'll be talking about environments and what those are. We'll be talking about private registry. So for instance, if you have Docker Hub or Quay or something like that, and you have private registries, we can talk about that. We'll talk about adding resources and hosts. We'll be talking about stacks and services. No worries if you don't understand what those terminologies are right now. I'll definitely be going more into detail. Load balancers, service discovery. We'll be going through the UI and API and CLI access, a lot of awesome stuff. Rancher Compose, our Rancher catalog, as well as a quick demo of Kubernetes. I actually won't be going into too much detail about Kubernetes because we do have a separate Rancher training about Kubernetes on Rancher. But I will be just sort of showing you what it looks like. But if you are looking for more detail about that, definitely go and check out our Kubernetes Rancher training. If you just search for Rancher Kubernetes training, that should pop up on Google for you. Or here as well. And I'll definitely show the slide at the end. And once again, so obviously those slides were kept to a minimum, so hopefully that was short enough for you. And we'll be talking about Rancher itself now. So, okay, so let me go ahead and tell you about our setup, as well as just sort of an overview of how our releases work. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our docs here. Okay, here they are. Okay, so these are our Rancher docs. Once again, that's at rancher.com/docs. And today, latest is, I'll be using the latest tag, which is tagged for Rancher 1.6.10. In order to do a quick start of Rancher, you can go ahead and click on the quick start section right here. And you can go ahead and run that command on whatever host that you have set up. So let's go ahead and talk about how releases work. So releases are, we always have latest or stable. Today I'll be using latest. Again, that's Rancher 1.6.10. And every month we will set out a new release for y'all. This will include, different bug fixes, different features that are added to each new release. The only changes that will happen is oftentimes we'll send out patch releases in case there's critical bugs that we need to have fixed. Today I will be using, let's go ahead and click on installing Rancher here. So today I will be using the single container non-HA setup, so that's right here, as well as the internal MySQL database. So with Rancher, it's actually recommended that you point your Rancher instance to an external database. This is because it can handle more specificity as well as higher loads and just different awesome things that you can configure yourself with the external database. However, just for demo purposes, we're using the internal MySQL database. So here you can go through on your own time of a bunch of different setups that you can set up Rancher with. So for instance, if you wanted to do an external database or perhaps doing an HA setup. So that's enough of the docs. Let's go ahead and start doing demoing. Okay, so what I have today is a Rancher server. The command that I ran here is copy and pasted from that quick start. And you can see that it's sudo docker run -d restart unless stopped, and we're exposing port 8080. And then the Rancher server version is v1.6.10. Because this takes a while to set up, I've already run that command there. So if we go ahead and do a docker ps, you'll see that my server is there running. I didn't want to take up any demo time, so I set that up already. Cool. Because I've set that up, let's go ahead and go to where that server exposed. So it's port 8080 on that IP address. And the first thing that we want to do always when we set up a Rancher server is go ahead into admin tab. You'll see this red exclamation point here. And that's just indicating to you that you need to set up access control. I'm going to go ahead and do local. I'll do Rancher demo, and then set up a super secret password here, and then enable local authentication. So what I just did was I set up local authentication and access control. So what this means is that the rest of the world is unable to access my Rancher server. If I had not set that up, there would be no login required, and anyone in the entire world could do malicious things on my Rancher server. You also saw that, so what I did was I set up the local access control, so that's for a username and login. You could also set it up with LDAP or perhaps with a GitHub, as well as other authentication methods. You'll also notice that after I set up access control, Rancher just turns on authentication and automatically logs me in. So for instance, let me do the drop down here, and you can see that I am logged in as the username Rancher demo, and I already have I have admin access because I am the first one to set up this access control. Let's go ahead and explore this admin tab a little bit more. So another thing that I can do is if I hit accounts right here is I can add other users to my environment. Later, or I can add more users. So later I'll go ahead and talk about adding users to environments as well as roles and other things like that, but let's go ahead and add a user. So let's just call this Rancher user. set up a password. And the account type you'll notice here is user, and they have special permissions that are different from admin. Let's go ahead and click on create here. Awesome. And you can see that I have created a new user called Rancher user of type user. And I'll go ahead and demo more about that later on. Let's go ahead and continue exploring the admin tab. So we can look at audit logs here. So once authentication is turned on, so audit logs will only show up after authentication is turned on, we can sort of show different activities users are making and changes. So basically this just shows different API calls that different users are making. So for instance, right here, Rancher demo, I am the admin user. What I did was I created a new user so you can see the activity and different API calls that I made here. So I did API account create and then API password create to set up my new user. And this is useful for just looking at different activity and perhaps useful for debugging and things like that for like recent things that you've done per each user. The other thing that we can look at in the admin tab here is different processes. And the summary, there's nothing showing here, but let's look at recently completed. Awesome. So what processes does is pretty self-explanatory. It gives information about processes, and again, this is super useful for even more granular troubleshooting. So here you can see different processes that were recently completed, the resource that was used, the name of the process, the ID of the process, start time, end time, and a bunch of awesome things like that. And you can also show different activities here, which is you can replay this process and view this process in the API. And the next thing I can show you here, today, once again, we do not have an HA set up, but if we did, it would be able to show different IDs, like the UID and things like that, of our HA setup. So I won't go into too much detail here because that is not what we have today. Okay, so I'll go into more detail about the other parts of the admin tab later on, but let's go ahead and jump into what an environment is. I'm going to go ahead and click here. I've talked a lot about environments, and I've mentioned it here and there. So what is an environment? Well, an environment is the way that we isolate resources. So for instance, we can have a dev environment or a production environment, or perhaps a test environment. Environments are owned by users and groups, and what they have inside each environment that's isolated are hosts and Rancher resources. So for instance, Rancher resources can include things like containers, infrastructure services, and things like that. Our hosts and Rancher resources, once again, each belong to an environment. So you're not able to access hosts or Rancher resources across environments. So let me go ahead and actually show you an environment. So here, what we can see are that we have environment templates. So let me go ahead and click on that and explain to you in a second what that is. So let me call this demo environment. So what a template is that it defines a set of infrastructure services, and I'll scroll down in a second. And here you can pick different things like the orchestration, the container orchestration platform that you want to use. Today I will be using Cattle. Here we have different applications and external DNS and things like that. We have management stacks, services. We have networking things, storage, and different frameworks and things we can use. So once again, templates, they define infrastructure services, and once we create a template, you're able to then launch environments from this template. So creating a template in itself doesn't create an environment, it just creates a repeatable template in order to launch your different environments that have these infrastructure services sort of that come with it. Let me go ahead and create this template. And here you can see that I have demo environment created here. And I'm going to go ahead and add environment, and I'm going to do demo environment. And then here, that's where you see that it is now an option to launch our template from here. I didn't actually set up any infrastructure services that come with it, but once again, that is an option for you to have this sort of repeatable template to spin up various environments in an easy fashion. You remember before that I created a user, so I'm going to go ahead and add this user now to the demo environment that I am about to create. I believe I called it Rancher user. If not, I can. Awesome. The name was Rancher user. So here we can see that a Rancher user, that adding a user to environment, they can take on various roles. And I'll show you the section where you can read more about that in the documentation. So for instance, we can have a Rancher owner. So what a Rancher owner can do is they can set up, infrastructure services, hosts, and a bunch of owner-like capabilities. So for instance, if you were to add a read-only user to this environment, they're not able to set up things like Rancher hosts or infrastructure services. Restricted, they're only allowed to have like a restricted set of permissions to do things within your environment. Let me go ahead and show you where that is. I believe it's in the environment section. Roles and environment. Yep, here we go. You can read more about that in the documentation here. So, right, the owner is able to change the status or membership of an environment within the membership list, change infrastructure services. Members are also able to change the membership roles of existing members, and they're able to view infrastructure services. So you can read all about that things in more detail in this part of the documentation. So let's go ahead and create this environment. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and actually create another environment. And what the environment that I'm going to create is one with the Kubernetes as the container orchestration management platform, because this takes a little while to set up. And we'll revisit this later on in the demo. And I'm going to go ahead and add some hosts to the Kubernetes environment. Once again, I will talk about this in more detail. We'll revisit this adding hosts in my regular demo environment. So I'm going to go ahead and pause my screen so I can set this up, because there's lots of private information that I need to set up. So let's go ahead and do this. Don't worry about what I'm doing right now, because I will talk about this and redo it in 1 second. This part just sort of takes a little while to set up. And I definitely want to show you the Kubernetes section. Okay. Okay, go ahead and create that. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch to my demo environment and show you my screen again. Cool. So let's go ahead and talk about adding hosts. Okay, so for each environment, the next thing that you need to do is go ahead and click on infrastructure and adding hosts. So hosts are essentially where the containers and different user services that you set up, that is where they will live, essentially. So here we have hosts, add hosts. I'm going to go ahead and click on add hosts. I'm going to go ahead and click on custom. So what I have already done is that I've set up 2 DigitalOcean instances, and I have pre-pulled a bunch of Docker images and different containers that I'll be using to demo, and that's about it. I've also installed Docker on there. But other than that, it's pretty blank. And per host, what you will do is run this command here that you can just copy and paste super easily. Let me go ahead and switch my screen. And here you can see that I have SSH'd into my demo host. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this command here. And what it is currently doing is that it is installing the Rancher agent on the host in order to communicate with the Rancher server container. And it does a bunch of awesome stuff, like it has a password and token to authenticate against our Rancher server. It seems like I have SSH into the demo host 2 again, so I'm going to exit that. Go ahead and clear. And I'm going to go ahead and SSH into my demo host 1, which is the other one. I'm going to pause my screen again. Okay. Let me copy my IP address there. Root at okay. Let me go ahead and unpause this screen again. Okay, cool. And then what I'm going to do again is go ahead and copy and paste this command onto my Rancher host 1. Oops, it looks like, okay, so we're just gonna go ahead and work with 1 host here, and I think that will, that's enough for today. Yeah, so I have the demo host here, and let's go ahead and do a Docker PS to show you all of the neat stuff going on. After running that command, what it does is it sets up a bunch of containers that will register our host and our Rancher agent against our Rancher server. So let's go ahead and go back to our host page, and we can see that we have Amy demo host 2 registered here against our Rancher server. So this is a nifty thing, is that if you are using a Docker version on your Rancher host that is perhaps not recognized or supported by the Rancher server, you'll get a flag right here telling you that. Another way that we can add hosts are using the access token here. So we have a bunch of different options. So we can use DigitalOcean, Packet, Azure, Amazon EC2 instances. Let me go ahead and click on the Manage Available Machine Driver section. We have a bunch of different machine driver options here as well that you can check out on your own time. The ones that we sort of just automatically enabled were just the ones that were most commonly used. So I'm going to go ahead and pause my screen and copy and paste the access token there. So let me go ahead and pause this. And hunt down my DigitalOcean API access token. Cool. Let me go ahead and regenerate this token. And okay, so I'm going to unpause my screen again. We're going to paste this access token here and then click on configure droplet. And so let me do Amy demo host 3. And then here you can also, toggle the quantity that you want here of how many hosts you want. So I'm actually going to toggle that to 2. Here we can talk about adding labels. So what that is used for is is for scheduling. So if there were certain hosts that you wanted your containers to run on, you can schedule them based on the labels. I won't do that, but I will revisit that in the future as part of this demo. So I'm going to go ahead and create 2 hosts and click create here. And that will go ahead and create my host right there. Let's go ahead into actually the stack section. And if you're not understanding what a stack is now, no worries, I will talk about that in a second. So here I specifically clicked on the infrastructure stack. So we have a bunch of awesome things that make Rancher work. So for instance, we have the health check stack that is in charge of communication between our hosts and instances and make sure our hosts are healthy, our container instances are healthy, and a bunch of awesome things like that. We also have an IPsec stack that is used for networking. We also have a network services stack that is responsible for things like DNS or metadata. And we have our scheduler, which is responsible for where we want to schedule our services and our containers. Once again, I'll go more into detail about what a stack actually is later on. But let's go ahead and go back to our infrastructure tab. I have already sort of talked about our hosts. Let's go ahead and talk about containers. So here you can see all of the containers that are up and running, their health state. So this is great in that all of these containers are healthy. These are all containers that were running within each of our infrastructure stacks that you saw before. So this section has, for instance, the name of each of our containers, the IP address on which they're running on. We have the host name on which they're running on, the image name as well as version, and perhaps the command that they ran to after the container started up. So you can see a bunch of awesome information there. Let's go ahead and talk and check out our storage section. So if we were to set up storage drivers, for instance, one popular one is Rancher NFS. That would show up here. Today I haven't actually set that up, but it would show up here if I had. So this is, you can look at different volume and storage drivers here. Secrets, once again, this is another thing that you can check out on your own time. So in order to set up secrets, what you need to do is launch the secrets infrastructure service from our catalog library. I'll talk about catalog again in the future part of this demo. Another thing that we can check out are certificates. So what these are used for, I'm going to go ahead and click add certificates, is they're used for load balancing, or if you wanted to have SSL termination. So for instance, if you wanted to set up HTTPS or TLS or a bunch of awesome SSL termination protocols like that. So what you would do is name your certificate, add your private key, add your certificate, or perhaps if you have chain certificates here, you can add them there, and that will be made available to your Rancher environment. This is adding private registries, so you can click on Add Registry here, include your username and password for Docker Hub. We also have Quay, as well as if you wanted to add a custom private registry. And let's go ahead. So I did a lot of talking about all these different things. Let's go ahead and launch some containers and really see how Rancher works and how easy it is to set up containers. I'm going to go ahead and actually check up on my hosts and make sure they're spinning up. Awesome. So we talked about labels before. Let's go ahead and revisit that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Edit. What I'm going to do here is add a label and call this demo. Let's go ahead and call this demo, and then I'll just call this demo again, demo equals demo. And go ahead and click Save. And then I'm going to go ahead and do that for another one of my hosts and add a label here and do demo equals demo. And we'll see later on how this is useful and how I can use this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just sort of brush through what a stack is really quickly. I won't go into too much detail. I'll talk about that in the next stack that I set up. So the first thing that we're going to do is set up a blog. So I'm going to call this stack blog. And actually, let's see if this is the way that I want to do this. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and set up blog, and I'm going to go ahead and click create. And then what I'm going to do here is add a service. And what I want to do is only run one container, and my app is going to be called Ghost. The image I'm going to be used is called Ghost. And so what I'm doing here, Ghost is a blogging platform, and it's just going to be sort of serve as a demonstration. And we're going to, spin up a blog really quick. Below here, let's do sort of like a quick tour. You can run commands upon container startup. If you had volumes that you wanted your container to access, you can add them here. We have networking, security, secrets. I'm going to quickly run through that and skip to labels. We're going to go ahead and click on, so labels actually is used for scheduling as well. I won't actually be using container label, but what I'm going to do is click on scheduling in this section here. So I'm going to do add scheduling rule. So you remember before that for our host, what we did is for two of our hosts, we added the label demo equals demo. And what I want to do is be able to schedule my container and restrict it to either one of those hosts that has a label of demo equals demo. So here we have this scheduling rule that says the host must, this is the condition. You can add specificity here. You could say should not, or must not, and those are varying levels of preferences. So should, let's say, like our host is super busy, like if worst case scenario, our host is unable to handle our container, we can schedule it on something perhaps that doesn't necessarily have to have that label, but if it isn't super busy, then we should schedule it onto that host. However, I'm going to hit must there, have a host label. You can also filter out for container with a label. So that was where we saw before. We have labels section, service with a name, container with a name. We're going to do host label of demo key equals demo here. I'm going to go ahead and click create. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead. Oops, actually, this is great because there's something that I forgot to do. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And we're going to do, I'm going to show you the error that I made. So let's go ahead and redo this. So I'm going to go and call this Ghost. The thing that I forgot to do was actually expose a port. So the public port that I forgot to expose, I'm going to go ahead and do the public port of 2368. And the private container port that we want to route to is also 2368. That's just sort of the private port in the Docker container that is exposed. So the mistake that I made before was I didn't actually expose a public host port. Without doing that, there's no way for the rest of the world to be able to access my Ghost container. So let's go ahead and redo this and sort of solidify what we had done before. Scheduling rule must have a host label of demo equals demo. Let's go ahead and click create. Awesome. So you'll note that prior to doing this, this ports thing wasn't here before, so there was no way to sort of like access my Ghost blog. So I think it's up and running, fingers crossed. I think, okay, awesome. It just needed a second to sort of spin up. And there you have it. We have a Ghost blog that was just really easy to spin up. And that was super quick and fast and running. And you can set up your own blog in seconds. Alrighty, so I sort of threw around the term stack and services and containers. Let's do a walkthrough and like revert and talk about what each of these things are in the next demo that I'm about to do. Okay, let's take a sip of water there. You'll note, first of all, that when we created a stack, we did that within the user section. So these are sort of user-defined stacks that you will be spinning up. Nothing you really do that you sort of self-define will be in the infrastructure stack. Those are sort of just like things that come with Rancher, or perhaps infrastructure stacks that you pick within the catalog. So user stacks are sort of self-defined, and they're super fluid in the sense that you can define like a bunch of things like logs, or the next thing I'm about to show you. So the scope of a stack is, you can think of that as the scope of an app. So one stack has everything that you need a app to be up and running. So I'm going to go ahead and add another stack, and then this demo is actually going to be a Nginx container. What do I want to call this? So let me call this Nginx for lack of creativity there. Let me go ahead and click create. Once again, we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to add a service. So what is a service? The easy way to sort of summarize this is a service is a group of containers. So here you can look at scale there. And so for instance, I can scale this all the way up to 40 containers, or like, yeah, it's a lot, or like 100 or something like that. I'm actually just going to keep it at, let's see, I think 10 is a good number. It's like a good round number. And each of the containers that are spun up within the service are identical. So what we're doing is we're running 10 identical containers within this one service. I'm going to call this Nginx again. And this demo, what I'm actually doing is I'm going to be using an image that my coworker defined. And all it is a Nginx container. Oops. Let me go ahead and remove Dr. Pohl here. All it is a Nginx container where if I hit an endpoint, what it will do is it will show sort of the IP that I am, or sorry, the container ID that I am running, that my load balancer is routing this to. So after I spin up the service, what I also will be doing is spinning up a load balancer to put in front of the service, and my load balancer will route traffic to different containers. Okay, let's go ahead and expose I'm going to expose port 8081. And once again, the private container port that's exposed within the container is route 80. Let me see if there is anything that I want to do on here. I think that looks about good. Cool. In terms of scheduling rules, I don't think I'm going to be adding anything on here. So that looks fine to me. I'm going to go ahead and click create. Okay, and so while these are sort of all spinning up, I'm going to add another service, and I'm going to only run one container, and what I want to do is add a load balancer. Oops, I should actually have hit the drop-down menu. Okay, let's go ahead and debug what is going on with this. Awesome, you can see some live debugging here. It looks like some of these containers are up and running. So what you saw was I click the service, and it will show me a bunch of these things that are up and running. I'm going to go ahead and just sort of allow that to spin up, I guess. Let me go back and click on the user Nginx. I'm going to go ahead and delete this again and re-spin it up. And the whole idea is, that's sort of the idea of containers, right? Where it's like, if something is unhealthy, then you can go ahead and just re-spin it up really quickly, because it is super fast and easy to do. So go ahead and click create. I'm going to go ahead and now add a load balancer. And then I'm going to do Nginx LB. And so the service that I want to target here is my Nginx server. And then the port that, let's see, the port that I want to expose is 8081. And I want my target port to be port 80. That looks good to me. I also don't really need to do any scheduling rules. I'm going to go ahead and click create. Okay. Let's go ahead and give that a second to spin up. So what I'll do after that, to sort of give you a preview, is I'm going to go ahead and click on this endpoint and then add the route name.html. After you do that, what will happen is we will show the container ID. I'll click refresh a couple times, and the container ID will change. So let's just give this a second to spin up. And what this is supposed to demonstrate is actually that we are able to have the load balancer route traffic to different containers. Okay, this is active, up and running. Welcome to Nginx. Awesome. Let's go ahead and type out name.html as our endpoint. Okay, so you can see that for this session, I guess we can call it, we have routed to the container with the ID of 9EE. Let's go ahead and refresh a couple times. Usually takes a couple tries to get a different ID because there's usually some sort of like caching thing going on. I'm going to try maybe opening an incognito window and see if I get a different ID. Let's see. That is because I only have one container up and running. So let's go ahead and edit this. Oops, let me go back to user. Container, let's click on upgrade actually. Batch size 1, batch interval. Let's try 3 here and see if that will upgrade it to 3 containers. Cool. So that is currently at 1 container. But yeah, so I'm going to try and click edit again. So there should be So here you can see that I would be able to edit the container name and public host, port, and ID, and things like that. Let me go ahead and delete this and redo this stack again to further illustrate that. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and click create, add service, and all this will do is, the good thing is we can just, further establish what we've done before. So let's call this Nginx, create, and then add another service, add a load balancer, run one container, let's do Nginx LB, and then port 8081, target the Nginx service, port 80, and go ahead and click create. And then wait for this LB to get up and running. It's initializing and setting up the Nginx container. Cool. Let's go ahead and click on the endpoint, and fingers crossed, if we refresh a few times, it should now route the traffic to a different container. The demo gods are not with me today. Let's go ahead and try a incognito window and see what's up here. Awesome. So I believe, yep, that is a different ID. So you can see here we have 950 as a container ID here. And then here we were routed to a container ID of 917. And so that just sort of illustrates to you that you can, if you need your service to be super available, all you can do is just horizontally scale. Perhaps if you even want to add a few more load balancers in there, you can do that, and you can handle any sort of traffic that you need to handle. So, okay, let's see what else I can demo. The next thing that I can talk about actually is Rancher catalogs. Let's go ahead and go back to our Rancher UI. I'm going to click out of this stuff. Catalogs are super useful. So we have two sorts of catalogs. One is called a library catalog. The other is called community catalog. So library catalogs sort of, I'm going to go ahead and click on that, have the Rancher stamp of approval in the sense of like, we trust these catalogs and support them. And all a catalog is it essentially spins up a stack that will run different services or apps that you want up and running. So for instance, in our library catalog section, we have things like if you wanted to spin up Kubernetes, you can launch that via catalog. Or let's go ahead and scroll down. So we mentioned Rancher secrets before. That's super easy. And once you click on them, all you need to do is answer what are called Rancher questions. And these are sort of just like configuration elements that you want to do for your specific setup. So you can check that out here. For instance, configure this, toggle these things, or there's sometimes a drop-down menu of like different versions that you want to enable for different catalogs and things like that. What community catalog is our Rancher community is super active, and these are catalogs that our community members have contributed that will also set up like different apps or services that you may want to use. So for instance, we can see that Datadog is here if you wanted to set that up. Again, it's really easy. You could just click it and have different configuration options there. And you can check that out on your own time as well. I believe Ghost should also be here if I do a quick search in the search bar. Awesome. So what you saw before, we had Ghost. So if I was lazy and didn't feel like typing out the images myself, what I can do here is just set it up and pick different versions and things like that. And it's super easy to set up, and it's just like a click of a button. And if I wanted to change the configuration option in terms of which port I want to expose, you can change that here. And then I'm going to go ahead and click launch to sort of illustrate that. So here you can see that with one click of the button, it just sort of sets it up for you. It's currently spinning up, I believe. And you can see that the Ghost app is set up for you there with through the catalog. So if you didn't feel like configuring your different stacks and services yourself, you can do that via catalogs that our community members have contributed. Feel free to contribute yourself as well. We accept community catalog pull requests within our community catalogs Rancher repo. And that is definitely something that we are open to accepting more community catalog templates for. So let's go ahead and now talk about the Rancher CLI. I'm going to go ahead and download that here. So in order to download that, it is just an executable file. I'm going to be using Rancher CLI today. My operating system that I'm using is Mac OS. Let's go ahead and click that. And here you can see that the executable is enabled here. I'm going to pull up a terminal here to illustrate that. Let's open a new tab and go to my local machine. So I'm going to go ahead and cd into, I believe what I downloaded was, let me go ahead and check that out. I believe what I downloaded was Rancher v0.6.4. v0.6.4. Okay, so what I want to do now, Rancher CLI, all it is essentially what it'll do is coordinate with your Rancher server. So for instance, the way that we coordinated with our Rancher server prior to this was just via the UI. So let's say you wanted to say like run some automation script or something that's related to Rancher, you can use the Rancher CLI tool, or if you're just interested in using your terminal because that's more convenient to you, that is also a possibility. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do Rancher config. So what is Rancher config? All Rancher config is that it configures your command line tool with your Rancher server and has a bunch of authentication things like that. I'm going to go ahead and click on API keys. And the other thing I need to do is copy and paste my Rancher server here, Rancher server IP. So, and then next what it's asking for is my access key. So I'm going to add an account API key. I'm going to call this Amy demo key. Go ahead and click create. Access key, I'm going to go ahead and copy that here. And then copy and paste my secret key. And the environment, let's see, the environment that I feel like using today is 2. So go ahead and click on that. Awesome. So here, what we can do, let's actually type out Rancher help. I believe it's -- help. Awesome. And if you, like, obviously, if you wanted to, add this to your path, you can go ahead and add this binary to your path and add it to, I believe, one of your like root bin files or something like that. Anyway, so we can see a lot of different options in order to coordinate with the Rancher server. So for instance, we can launch catalogs here. We can, look at the status of different things. We can interact with the environments, display resource change environments. Basically, anything that you can do in the UI, you can do in the CLI as well. Let's go ahead and actually run Rancher. let's see, Rancher, let's see what I want to do today, --env. And what I'm going to do here is include my environment ID, and the environment ID I'm using today is 1A13. And I'm going to do a PS. So here what you are seeing is that I'm just sort of showing you the different services that are launched inside my environment. So what you can see here is that I have launched the Ghost service, I've launched the Nginx service, the Nginx load balancer service, as well as another Ghost service that I launched from our catalog that we saw before. We can see the health state, the scale of each services, and the amount of containers running within each service, and then the service ID and a bunch of awesome stuff like that that you can check out and read through the docs on your own time once again. So I believe that is a complete run-through of Rancher. I hope you enjoyed this demo. Oh, right, the next thing that I want to do is sort of show you what Kubernetes looks like. So this was the Kubernetes environment that I had set up prior. Once again, I set it up before because it kind of takes a long time to spin up because there's a bunch of different Kubernetes infrastructure services that need to be set up. So this is my Kubernetes environment. Let's go ahead and click on Kubernetes UI. So what the Kubernetes UI here is that it's the Kubernetes dashboard that you can check out. So you can check out like different namespaces, node, persistent volumes, and a bunch of awesome UI things related to Kubernetes here. The other thing that I can show you is the infrastructure stacks that we have with Kubernetes. So the main thing that I've realized that running Kubernetes is the overhead to learn how to spin up a Kubernetes cluster is really high. So what Rancher actually does is it spins up and sets up Kubernetes cluster for you. I know there's things out there like Minikube and things like that, but I personally have never actually needed to learn how to spin up a Kubernetes cluster because I just depended on Rancher to do it for me. And once again, that you saw before, it was really easy because we could just click it and it will just work essentially. These are all the infrastructure stacks that we need in order to get Kubernetes up and running. And the other thing that we can check out is we can coordinate with Kubernetes via kubectl within a shell that we can directly coordinate with here. So let's try the example they provided us, kubectl get all. And we can see all the different resources that Kubernetes has up and running here. If you're not interested in using the shell that we provide, we can click on generate config, put this into your kube config file, and it will set up all these sort of authentication things in order to authenticate against your Kubernetes cluster. That's the end of, that's as much as I'll be talking about Kubernetes for now. Once again, there's a bunch of awesome Kubernetes information that you can see within our Kubernetes Rancher training. And that is the end of our Rancher training today. Thank you everyone so much for your time. If you were interested in the Kubernetes training and learning more about Kubernetes, you can look at that through rancher.com/Kubernetes training. The walkthrough is pretty great. I also believe on our Rancher YouTube channel, we possibly have a few of them up and running. However, we always like to try to make sure that you're up to date. So every Kubernetes training will be up to date with the most recent Rancher stable version that we're using. So I believe the next Kubernetes training will be on 1.6.10 as well, possibly 1.6.11, depending on our release cycle. If you, after all this, you thought this was super cool, you can definitely check out Rancher through the Rancher sandbox through try.rancher.com, and that is a super quick and easy way to try Rancher yourself. Let me go ahead and escape. because the next super exciting thing that I wanted to talk about is actually we have Rancher 2.0 that's released. This is special, and our team has been working really hard to get this released. Definitely try it out. Tell us about any bugs that you have perhaps seen while you're running with this. This is just a 2.0 preview. What I've done today, once again, was 1.6.10. 2.0 is just a sort of like tech preview stages now. So definitely check that out, try that out, and please provide us feedback either through Rancher Slack or forums. That is the end of the demo today. Thank you everyone once again for your time. Let me see if there's sort of like any common questions that maybe I can look through here in the question section. It doesn't seem like there's any common ones that I can answer now, but if you have any questions, please go to our Rancher Slacks or chat with us through our Rancher forum, and that's like the best way you can reach out to us. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar now, and definitely make sure to chat with us within our the different means that we can that we have provided through Rancher forums and Rancher Slack. Awesome.